And now what what I'd like to share is a story. We're finishing up this coming Shabbat, the Torah readings having to do with building the sanctuary. And we're also, at least my mind is beginning to start drifting over to Passover. So this is a story that we're going to read in two versions or in two formats. It's a story that is over 1,000 years old in terms of the records we have of people telling the story. And it also exists as a Motzei Shabbat, as after Havdalah, a song that some people sing. So we have, if we have the time, we'll do the two versions in print, and then we'll also be able to listen to a little clip of how it gets to be sung. So now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and now I'm going to go like this. Here we are. Okay, readable. The Wonderful Slave. Okay, who's going to read for us today?
I guess it's going to fall to me because I don't know if Merle can you read?
Well, let me just make a comment here. I really can't ever read because I have a condition where I have to clear my throat all the time.
Okay.
And in conversation, it's bad enough, but reading it would be impossible. So distracting and annoying. So I never volunteer.
Oh, okay. And since John read last week, I guess it falls to me to read this week.
That's it.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
The Wonderful Slave. There was once upon a time a very poor man who had a wife and 5 children. It happened one day that there was no food in the house. The wife told her husband that she had nothing to give the children. And I am sorry to say, he cried, I haven't a penny. I cannot find any work, and I don't know what will become of us. God help us, I cannot see any way out of our misfortune. Cheer up, dear husband. Go down to the marketplace, and perhaps you will be in luck's way and find some job. You are no fool. You often say, God neither slumbers nor sleeps, but watches over all of us. To whom can I turn when I get there? I don't know a soul there. As you know, we haven't a relative in the town, and as for friends, well, we know what they are worth. When we had money, we had plenty of friends, but when we lost our wealth, we also lost our friends. There is, good husband, still one friend left. You mean the good God? Of course I do. Now, don't waste time, for we are all starving. Go to the marketplace and see what happens. Away he went. Meanwhile, the poor children came to their mother and cried for bread. This distressed her very much. She wept and prayed to God to help them in their hour of need. When the poor man reached the marketplace, he stood still for a few minutes looking around. It was full of people hurrying hither and thither. Not a soul did the unfortunate man recognize. Passers-by just looked at him, and he felt very lonely and sad. He walked across the marketplace and sat down behind some bundles of hay, where he would be hidden from view. He began to pray, saying,
One second. One second. Okay. Wait, hold on. Good.
Okay, yeah. Lord of the universe, excuse me, Lord of the universe, thou knowest that I have neither relative nor friend to whom I can go and pour out my heart's troubles. Thou seest the dire poverty and distress which have befallen my family. My only hope is in thee. Take pity upon us, not for my sake, but for the sake of my poor wife and helpless children. I beseech thee, send us thy help, or if it seem good in thine eyes, let us die, for we know neither peace nor rest. The man then arose and went, and was somewhat taken aback to see a young man at his side. The stranger was Elijah, the prophet, who is like the good fairy in the storybooks. His mission is to comfort all who are in trouble. He champions those who cannot find anyone to help them. He defends lost causes and helps all those who need succor. He reclaims the lost and seeks those who stray from the highway of life through no default on their part. He is ever moved by a passion of pity and hastens to the side of all who have faith in God, even when all else fails. Good day,
Oh, wait,
good friend.
let's stop. Let's just take a pause for a second. So is this an accurate description of Elijah that we have in our own concept? No? John is shaking his head no. Why
I
not?
mean, I'm not an Elijah expert, but like what does it say? The tooth fairy or something? What did it say? Like the
Good fairy.
good
Yeah, the
fairy.
good fairy, yeah. So you just don't believe in the good fairy, or that's not?
No,
an-
I mean, I think of Elijah as heralding the Moshiach, you know, and
Right. So when we get into the Shabbat right before Pesach, which is in like 2 Shabbatot, 3,
Right.
whatever it is. This one, next one, when is it? Hold on a second. I'm getting confused.
2 weeks,
Well,
2 weeks from Saturday, 2 weeks from the
27th.
Saturday.
The 27th, the Shabbat, it's actually the day right before the night of the Seder, is Shabbat HaGadol. But that Shabbat, which is the Shabbat before Pesach, Elijah is mentioned in the Haftarah. Him going to be coming. He's going to herald the reconciliation of the children with the parents with the children. Then this is the Messianic era. So that's what we have in biblical imagery, obviously from later prophets. But what's Elijah's role, for instance, in the Passover night?
He comes and drinks the wine.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it, right? He's got this gig that he has to drink everybody's wine. Why?
Well, he had a hangover in the morning.
Why does he have to come to drink everybody's wine?
He might bring the Messiah, so you have to let him in.
Okay, so Passover, of course, is the celebration of our liberation from slavery from Egypt. That's our first redemption. That's the beginning of our history. And the Messiah is the end redemption, the ultimate redemption. The first redemption set us off on a journey. It has its ups and downs. Sometimes we do better, sometimes we do worse. But we began. That's the birth, the birth of a people. But that is a tasting of what redemption could be. And eventually Elijah will be the herald of the final redemption, when there won't be any more ups and downs. It'll just all be up. So that's Elijah. So he's the symbol of the final good days. And we welcome him to come and visit us on this night when we celebrate redemption. We open the door and say, you come in and visit us. There are other things to talk about with that, in regard to that, but we'll leave it as at that point right now. So then what's all this business about him being the one who, he helps all those who need succor. He reclaims the lost. He goes out of his way to look for those who have strayed. He's moved by a passion of pity. What's all that about? Does anybody have that as any recollection of that kind of image of him? So
no, he sounds like St. Christopher for Catholics.
You'll have to clue me in a little bit more on St. Christopher another time. I know that he has a medal, but as far as I know, there's no Elijah medal. But so the story with Elijah is actually an important story. Elijah, this description of Elijah is very accurate in terms of how Elijah became a folk hero in our tradition. And as I said, this story is over 1,000 years old, and there are many other stories all the way back to rabbinic times. And in fact, the whole idea in the Haftarah and the prophetic prediction of Malachi that Elijah is going to come to herald the Messiah, that's already a kind of an imagining that is nowhere mentioned in the Tanakh itself. Elijah is a prophet. He doesn't have his own prophetic book, but there's quite a bit of discussion of Elijah's career. Malachi. So in the book of Kings, and he was a guy who did a little fire and brimstone-y kind of stuff. He taught truth to power with regard to Ahab, the evil king, and Jezebel, his evil queen. He was a very zealous, fiery guy. And he was also, as sometimes some prophets are, very angry at the people for not being as good as they could be. And in the time that he lived, there was a lot of backsliding, a lot of idol worship. If anybody remembers the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel, anybody remember that story?
No.
So Elijah on Mount Carmel, Elijah is one of the last surviving prophets because Jezebel and Ahab, Achav, have murdered all of the prophets of God. Elijah was hiding out and he was able to be saved. And then finally, God says, you have to go out there and you have to confront the people. And he comes to Mount Carmel, which is where Haifa is now. And he sets up a contest between himself and the prophets of Baal. Baal was the popular god, the pagan god. And they have a contest about sacrifices. Each group, he offers a sacrifice to God, but first he waits and he says to the Baal prophets, okay, why don't you go first? There are more of you than there are of me. Why don't you offer a sacrifice to Baal and let's see if Baal answers you. So there's a whole theater of these priests praying and creating a sacrifice, but nothing happens. And then Elijah says, okay, now it's my turn. And he sets up an altar to God and he douses the sacrifice with water, more and more and more water, so that it makes no sense that this sacrifice would ever catch on fire. And he prays to God and the fire comes down from heaven and consumes the sacrifice. And then all the people go, Hashem hu ha-Elokim, Hashem hu ha-Elokim. God, the eternal, really is the Almighty God. And there's this mass revival meeting, so to speak. There's this mass, coming back in tshuva, in repentance to God. We say that phrase traditionally every Ma'ariv weekday night service, right before the Amidah. And we say it also 7 times at the end of Yom Kippur, right before we do the long shofar blast. So that is this peak moment of Elijah bringing everybody back to repentance. But as I said, he was really a fierce personality. He had a disciple, Elisha. Elisha took over from him, but he himself, Elijah, goes up to heaven in a fiery chariot. And this becomes the basis of the idea that Elijah never died. Elijah didn't die like the rest of us will or did, but he's taken up and he's immortal. So then what is the rest of his existence devoted to? So the answer is that the whole time when he was, in his regular life, he was this fire and brimstone guy, and he was very, very demanding, and he was very fierce. And God is not so happy with this.
It's never worked out.
And God says
What did the text say?
to Elijah, you have to cut the people a little slack. You have to be a little more gentle with them. You have to be a little more conciliatory. You have to be a little more caring. So the rest of his existence is always to come and be there in a moment of need for people who are downtrodden, the end of their rope. And there's a whole tradition, as I say, since the time of the rabbis, that people, when they get miraculously saved or helped, or there's some stranger that comes to their door and helps them out,
Next
and then
Monday.
disappears.
Doesn't mean you get it though.
And
Just
the
know that.
No, it's this Monday,
the
right?
story at the end is, who that stranger was? Who was that man?
Yeah, but even if I don't get it,
Who was that?
so I get an appointment later, so that's fine.
Who was
So
that
I did the,
John, we
mysterious
hear you.
stranger?
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
right.
in order to pay for that, Sam, you're gonna have to sit and listen to the rest of the story. Maybe you can make a short out of it. The Elijah becomes this helpful, compassionate, miraculous lifesaver. And there are zillions and zillions and zillions of stories that come about in that vein. So it's a total turnaround from his true depiction, his real career when he was the real Elijah, the earthly man, and he became this fantasy fairy tale figure, and that's who we're being introduced to here. So Elijah, all of a sudden pops up out of nowhere, right? The man is destitute and desperate, and then the next thing he knows, after he says, what does he say to God? He says, either help me or take my life, and take the life of my whole family, because we just can't keep going. At that low point, when he gets up, all of a sudden there's this guy standing right next to him. It's Elijah. Okay, with that little digression, here we go.
Good day, good friend, cries Elijah. Peace be unto you. Peace be unto you also, replies the poor man. Why are you so downcast? What's your trouble? How can you help me? I certainly cannot help you if you do not tell me why you look so forlorn and miserable. Have you lost at anything? Yes.
So this business, how can you help me? I think, when we read this in context, what the man is, he has lost all hope.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even believe that anybody can really help him, right? How can you help me? Forget it. Leave me alone. I'm miserable, and this is the end. But Elijah doesn't give up. Come on, tell me what's going on. Go ahead. Have you lost anything? Yes.
Explain, please. Do not hesitate to confide in me. You can really trust me. Good stranger, since you speak so kindly, I will trust you and tell you all about my misfortunes. I have at home a dear wife and 5 sweet children. They are all starving. There is not a crust in the house. I am penniless and out of work. I will gladly do anything if I can find anyone who will employ me. My will is good, and no toil will be too hard or too much for me. If you would really help me, find me work or recommend me to someone to give me employment. Elijah took hold of the man's hand and said, I think I can do something better for you than you suggest. I will do the work for you, which will enable you and your dear family to live in comfort. Do not worry and just do what I tell you. What do you wish me to do? You will go at once to the slave market, which adjoins this market. When we get there, you are to offer me for sale as a slave. The money you will get for my purchase shall be yours. Henceforth, you and your family will want no more. That's a weird phrase. How could I do?
This is an old book. So, to know want, right? To know neediness, to know poverty. You will know want no more.
No more. Okay. How could I do such a thing as you suggest? You are not my slave. You are a perfect stranger, and it would be far more reasonable to reverse the proposition. We will go to the slave market, and you shall offer me for sale. Whatever I am worth will suffice to keep my poor wife and children from starvation. Come, let us do as I say, and I shall be ever so grateful to you for obliging me in this way. No, no, cried Elijah. You are to sell me as your slave, and within 24 hours you will see me again. When you receive the money from the buyer in the market, do not forget to give me a coin. You do not know who I am. Continue to trust in God and follow my instructions. I assure you all will be well and you will be happy and contented. Now for the slave market. They came there, and all the buyers thought that the poor man was the slave and the stranger his master. They were surprised to hear the poor man call out in a bold voice, I have a most valuable slave for sale. The bidders began to make offers. At that moment, one of the princes of the king of the land passed by, and when he saw Elijah, he returned and resolved to buy such a noble-looking slave for the king, his master. The bidding went on, and the prince offered 80 pieces of gold, whereupon Elijah whispered to his poor friend, sell me now to this bidder. Do not accept a higher price. He did as Elijah told him and accepted the 80 pieces of gold and immediately gave one to his generous benefactor. The latter returned it, saying, Now take this coin and live by means of its blessing. It will enable you and all your family to exist in comfort. Want and poverty shall never again trouble you all the days of your life. We shall now part, and I wish you God's blessing. The poor man thanked Elijah with tears in his eyes. He said, I grieve to think you should allow yourself to become a slave just to help me and my family. I have done just as you told me because I seem to feel that you are wiser than I am. You said I should see you again within 24 hours. I do not see how that will be possible now that you are a slave. You will see me within the appointed time. Till then, farewell. Elijah then went away, following his new master. The fortunate poor man hastened home after he had bought food in the market. When he reached his home, he found his children and his wife famished with hunger. He spread the excellent food which he had brought with him upon the table and called his dear ones to see what the good God had given them. They ran to their usual seats at the table and could hardly believe their eyes. For 2 days they had seen no food, and now the table was loaded with fish and bread, cake, and fruit. They all said the grace before eating bread and enjoyed their meal more than they had ever done in all their life. They recited the grace after meals with gratitude in their hearts. Now a strange thing struck all at table, in spite of all they had eaten, and that was not by any means a small quantity. There was enough food left for a week's supply. This made them all the happier, and they praised God for his never-ending mercies. Reminds me about the oil at Hanukkah.
Right.
Now, please, said the wife to her husband, tell me, how did you manage to obtain all this beautiful food? It is all so good, and there is so much of it. I am dying to know what happened to you in the marketplace. I know you have not obtained all this food by theft. It was I who urged you to go to the marketplace, for I felt convinced that the good God would help us in our terrible misfortune. He told her all that had happened to him. He described how the stranger came to him in the market place and how he allowed himself to be sold as a slave. This is a marvelous slice of luck, she cried, but it is not all. He related how he had given the stranger 1 piece of gold and how it had been returned. The wonderful words which the stranger had said when he returned the piece of gold were also retold. Happiness filled the hearts of the good man and his wife. Henceforth, wealth and prosperity never forsook them. They were spared all further worldly cares and troubles. Meanwhile, the prince had brought his new slave before the king, his master. The latter had long planned in his mind to build a wonderful palace in wood adjoining his capital. He had already commenced the building. The foundation was completely finished. He had hired many slaves to carry wood, stone, and other material required for its construction. When Elijah came before the king, he was asked, "What is your trade?" I am an architect and also a practical builder.
which is not-
Excellent.
Which is not the same thing. Some architects are very impractical. Go ahead.
I thought of a practical builder as a construction.
Yeah,
Okay. General contractor. That's the word.
right.
Excellent, exclaimed the king in great joy. It is my ardent desire to complete the building of my palace in the wood nearby. My architect died 6 months ago, and since then the work seems to make no progress. It must be built according to my wishes. There must be so and so many stories.
It sounds like it. Yep.
Yep. With so and so many rooms on each floor. He then proceeded to tell him exactly what his wishes were. When he was finished, Elijah remarked, I will endeavor to carry out your majesty's plan exactly as you have explained. May I ask when is the building to be finished? If the building could be erected within 12 months, I would be exceedingly happy. If you achieve this result, I will give you your freedom and present you with a handsome gift. I will do my best, replied Elijah. And now may I ask your majesty to order your slaves to recommence, even at this very hour, their tasks. There are yet 4 hours before sundown. The labor is great and the time is short. The king forthwith ordered his chamberlain to do as Elijah had requested. The slave architect went to the wood and watched the slaves carrying brick and mortar. At sundown, they ceased their labor and went home. Elijah remained alone. He arose and prayed to God, asking him to cause the palace to be built there, and then even as the king desired. The prayer of the faithful prophet was heard by the great architect of the universe, who sent down myriads of his ministering angels to complete the building. The work was soon done. Every detail was carefully attended to by the heavenly builders. Before sunrise the next day, the wonderful palace stood complete. Elijah was well satisfied and went on his way. He was seen no more in the king's city. At daybreak, the people heard from the slaves who had gone to continue their tasks that the palace had been miraculously built overnight. The extraordinary news was at once communicated to the king. He went immediately to the wood to see the miracle. Needless to say, he was mightily pleased with everything he saw. He rejoiced to see the wish of his heart realized in such a brief space of time. Everything was done in accordance with his plan. There was not a single defect to be seen. Bring me, he cried, the miraculous slave who has performed the greatest miracle ever heard of in my kingdom. The servants of the king searched everywhere for the slave, but he was not to be found. This was reported to the king, who remarked, this is another miracle. He now saw that the slave was no ordinary one. I believe that the slave was an angel. Meanwhile, Elijah had gone to visit the man who he had befriended. When the latter saw him, he cried, you have indeed come to see me within the 24 hours as you promised. Tell me, good friend, who are you? I am Elijah the prophet.
That's it.
Keep going.
No. Okay, 1 second. What happened when you came before the king? He wanted a beautiful palace to be built within 12 months. God hearkened to my prayer, and within 12 hours, the palace was erected. This is all very wonderful. Naturally, whatever God does is miraculous, is marvelous. I assumed the role of a slave, and as a good price had been paid for my services, I determined to give good value in return. The palace, which has been built through my prayer, is, of course, worth more than 1,000 times the money paid to you. How saintly, Elijah, man of God, can I repay you? You have saved my life and the lives of my wife and children. You can repay me by living a good life, ever helping all God's children in distress. This I faithfully promise to do. The next moment, Elijah vanished, leaving the happy man full of joy and gratitude in his heart.
The end. Okay, so a nice one of these little,
Color.
folky fairy tale stories. Anybody have any comments? Anything jump out at you? Anything that you noticed?
Okay.
It takes a miracle from God
Yeah,
to
I'll
get
send you
something
an
built
email
on
with
time.
the
Or early,
Oh,
right?
price,
Early,
and I'm waiting to hear back from Sergey on.
right? Yeah.
What,
Carol.
one of the things as I was reading, when Elijah told him to give him back one of the coins, based on previous stories we have done over time, I have expected the man not to do it.
Right. Sometimes we have that, right? The people that fall down on their challenge, and
Right.
their own short-sightedness or their own greed or their own egos get in the way. This guy is a nice guy. He seems to
Yeah.
be a good guy. What about the beginning? And the story actually sort of comes, in two halves. There's the story of this
Wow.
man and all of his
I'm
trials.
sure they're
and
much
tribulations.
happier being separated.
And then there's the miracle story of Elijah with the palace. They're a little bit, disjunct, I think. Elijah could have just given him, a pot of gold and sent him on his way, right? What is the function? What Carol is noticing? What was the function of actually Elijah giving him the money and then asking for it back? I think
Like
that
redemption, like some kind of redemption.
What do you mean? Say it again.
Some kind of redemption, like I guess he's free now. He's not the slave anymore. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to identify in this story. I think about what we do in drama all the time, which is try to identify the central conflict, right? There's not really a lot of conflict in this story. There's maybe a conflict of Elijah. Should I give him a lot of value or not give the king a lot of value? That could be one conflict that seems to be resolved. But the conflict, this coin could have something to do with it. I'm having a hard time sort of identifying.
Right.
That's
So
why it's a little dull in a way. It's like a little.
Yeah, it's not the most dramatic
Yeah.
story. It's a sweet kind of reaffirming of, good people will be taken care of. God looks after nice people. But I think what Carol was noticing is there's a test here,
Yes.
right? That this good man is being tested by Elijah. Are you going to be trusting enough to say, are you kidding? You gave me this gold piece. I've been starving to death, and now you want me to give it back to you? So what's the point of this? In what sense are you actually helping me out? So I think that there is some test that is supposed to confirm that this guy is solid, right? This guy is a good man.
Mhm.
It does recall to me the half shekel that we all have to give to build a temple, right? That each and every one of us is obligated, no matter, as I wrote in the Torah Sparks, rich or poor, doesn't matter. Each of us has to give this minimal amount to be counted, right? To be included in the building of a sanctuary. And that's part of the ironic thing here. The second part of the story is this building, which is not a sanctuary at all, is it? It's just
It's
a
a
palace
palace.
for some anonymous king. We don't know anything about it, but it seems that Elijah is really interested in getting this done, right? When he whispers to the poor guy who's selling him as a slave, and we should get to that in a minute also, he says, okay, accept this bid. Don't worry. I don't care if anybody else wants to bid more. This bid has to be taken, right? Accept this guy and nobody else. Somebody else is going to offer more than 80 pieces. Forget it. So Elijah is somehow convinced he has to get sold to this guy. So to me, it makes it seem like Elijah knows this palace has to be built. It's important that palace be built. And that's part of the weirdness or the mystery. Why? What would be so important about this? This is not the temple. This is not some Jewish structure that is a synagogue or whatever. Nevertheless, this king has his heart set on having this palace built. He's had some trouble. The architect that died, everything seems to be mucked up and nothing is working. And Elijah then actually, he comes to the rescue twice in this story. The simple man who is helped out of deadly starvation, that's a real continuation of the tradition that I was describing before. Elijah's always there for the people who are on desperate straits, the people who are at their wits' end, the people who have nowhere else to turn. There's Elijah. And that's the first half. But then we get this second half of the story where Elijah comes to the rescue miraculously for a guy who we would say is not all that needy, right? I mean, he's the king. He's got immense wealth. He's got tremendous resources. So, there's only one architect in the whole kingdom, the guy that died. So get another architect. I mean, the sense of desperation doesn't seem well-founded. It's not like our compassion has to like flow out to this rich monarch. And yet Elijah takes this on, prays to God, gets divine assistance to miraculously get this structure built. Does anybody have any thoughts about what's the significance of that? Why would it be such a big deal?
When the Carol was reading, I was thinking, I was uncomfortable that Elijah wanted the slaves to work extra.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about what about them? What about their pains or wants or degradation? And so then maybe I thought as we were reading it that maybe the hurry up miraculous version is to sort of spare them from having to work hard. But it's not like they were freed. They'll just put them on. It's not going to give them a year off now.
Right.
They'll just put them on to something else.
So that's that's also one of the important elements of this story is that slavery is an accepted reality, right? There's no question here about being anti-slave. It's just who's going to buy the slave, who's going to sell the slave, who's going to put themselves up to be sold as bought as a slave or not. So there's a little role reversal. Everybody thought that the guy in the rags was going to be the slave to be sold, and the noble person was going to be the owner. And no, it turns out the opposite. The poor man ends up selling this very impressive man that everybody thinks is impressive, Elijah, as a slave. But slaving, the only argument they have is where the man says to Elijah, no, you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be sold as a slave. I shouldn't sell you as a slave. I should be the slave, right? I'm not worthy. And Elijah says, no, believe me, this is the right way to do it.
The way it's going.
This is the way it's going to work. But in terms of the institution of slavery per se, it doesn't seem to be, raising an eyebrow anywhere that this is something that's not acceptable. Yeah, Josie, you wanted to say something.
I was surprised when the king, instead of saying this man must be a magician, he must be a sorcerer, he knew right away he was from God. He said he's an angel. So the king is a God-fearing believer.
Right.
I didn't expect that.
Otherwise, we wouldn't open the door for him in this story. We wouldn't let him in.
Now, I mean, the king, I didn't expect the king to be keyed into God's work through Elijah.
And like I said before, for some reason, he rates this miracle. Elijah,
Right.
really is, God answers Elijah, and Elijah really wants to make this miracle happen. So it's a little mysterious for us, that apparently this king has some merit. This king has, and it's not obvious what it is, but for this, for the coherence of this story, this king is also okay. So
Is it the king or is it the prince? because the prince saw Elijah being sold as a
The prince-
slave,
yeah,
and,
but the
and it
prince
was
was-
the prince who really wanted him.
Yeah, he
And,
no, he said I
and
could-
Elijah told the man to accept this bid and not anything else. So it's almost like Elijah wanted to be a slave in this scenario, that Elijah knew something that we didn't know about in the
Right.
story.
But the prince is buying Elijah as a slave for his father, and then the rest of the interactions with his father. But yes, the prince is definitely doing a nice thing too, right? The prince is looking out for his father. He's definitely fulfilling the mitzvah of the 10 commandments of honor your father and mother, right? He's doing a good thing. So there, in the end, in terms of like conflict and drama, are there any bad people in this story? Not
The people
really.
who did
No.
well, not really, unless you go back to the beginning, the people who deserted the family when they didn't have any money.
Right. There was that bitter dig at the community that, they were fair weather friends, but then when things got rough, nobody wants to know anything about us, right? Nobody has anything to do with us. Nobody is willing to lend a hand. Nobody's willing to offer me a job. So we've seen these elements in other places as well, upending different kinds of expectations, right? Or assumptions, right? We assume the Jewish community is full of compassionate, wonderful, righteous people. Here's the whole community letting this guy go by the wayside, right? We assume that the king of the realm will either be a tyrant or an enemy or a fool like Achashverosh. Right? And here this guy seems to be, in some way, a halfway decent guy. One of the things that we have here, naturally, whatever God does is marvelous. I assumed the role of a slave, and as a good price had been paid for my services, I determined to give good value in return. So that's another little moralizing thing. Right? You
Yeah.
have obligations. And I think that comes back to the slavery situation. Slavery is not considered an abomination in this context. Even slaves have obligations, and slaves have to do the work that they're supposed to be doing. So Elijah says, let them finish their work today. They're meant to be working. Let them work. So it's a little surprising, like John pointed out. But then, of course, once they finish their work, so we're looking at everything go back to normal, and then everything, of course, goes into non-normal. So we're going to leave this for now. And like I said, I wanted to now give another version. And this version, as I said, is a Motzei Shabbat, post-Shabbat. After Shabbat is over, it's a Zmira, a song, a poem that is meant to be recited on Motzei Shabbat. So here is the song, and the poem. It's called Ish Chasid Haya. Once upon a time, there was a pious person. And as you say, a version of this emer appears in Machzor Vitri, so that's 1,000 years ago. It goes according to the Aleph Bet, Gimel, Dalet, etc. And then it's signed at the end by Yishai Rav Mordechai. So Ish Chasid Haya, Belim, Mazon U'Michya, Beveito Asak Milevosh, Ve'ein Bege Lilbosh. So it's a ditty with a long extended series of rhymes. We're not going to read it in the Hebrew. We'll read it in the English. But you know what? Because I don't know if we're going to have time to do everything. What I'm going to do is, that's not the way. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to find the other thing that I wanted. There we go. Okay, and now we go back to this, and now I'm going to share again. And here, let's hear this Zmira. Okay. It says Braslaber Malava Malka. Bratslav is a chassidic group. Lava Malka means escorting the queen, the Shabbat queen, as she leaves after Shabbat is over. You hang out a little bit more.
איש חסיד היה, בלי מזון ומחיה, בביתו עוסק מלבוש ואין בגד ללבוש. גונן בה חשובה אישה, וגם בבנים חמישה, דיברה לו האישה, יותר אין להתייאשה, המבלי לחם לאכול, בעירום ובחוסר כל. בתורה מצאת כי יגעת, מה נאכל מעתה? זהיר כבר נשוק, הלא תצא לשוק, חנון ורחום במרומיו, אולי יגמלנו כרחמיו. טוב לכובב מחסה, רצון יראיו יעשה. יעצת בדעת ובחוכמה, עצתך בלי להסכימה, קצאתי לבושת ולכלימה, מבלי כסות ושלמה. לאין בידי לפותה, אפילו שווה פרוטה, מירה ושאלה משכנים, מלבושים נעים מתוקנים, נלבש ושליך יהבו, על השם אשר אהבו. שחו ילדיו לפי עולם, על ישורדך נכלם. עבר בשוק בסברתו, הנה אליהו הנביא לקראתו. אץ לו המבשר, באמת היום תתעשר. צחני בכל כבודך, כי הנני עבדך. קרא למי בדעתו, קנות עבד אין כמותו. רחשך ישנה דינו, עבד למכור את אדונו. שד לו חוכמתו בקרבו, וחזיק בו כמו רבו. תגר כנעו באבי, ב800,000 זהובים. צבא אומה מלאכתך, אם בבניין חוכמתך, תכלית רקלין ופלטרים, הרי אתה בן חורים. יום ראשון במפעלים, פעלים פועלים. שבעה בחצי הלילה, ענני נורא עלילה. יזמתי ונמכרתי להרידי, לכבודך ולא לכבודי, בורא עולם בקניין. השלם השלם זה הבניין, רחמך יחמרו בחנינתי, כי לטוב כוונתי. מלאכי רחמים עם עונתו, אז החלו לבנותו. רבו בוני המנוחה, ותשלם כל המלאכה. סוחר בירותו, כי נגמרה מלאכתו. זולת מגדל עם נעים, כפי עניין הבנאים. ייזכר לך אתה, אתמול אשר דיברת, חופשני בוודאי ובבירור, כנעמת לעניין שחרור. זה כמו באמת, זה כמו באמת, זה כמו באמת, ופרח לו איש האמת.
All right. So that was a nice little ditty, and I'm going to start sharing again with, where did I go here? No. Okay, screen sharing has stopped, but now, hold on a second. Okay, and now I'm getting to this again. And now again, the screen sharing, and now again to this. And now here we go. Okay, so let's read this version. We have a couple of minutes and we'll see that there's a little bit of a few differences between this version and the one that we just read. Okay, here we go.
Once there was a pious man who had no food or sustenance. He studied Torah at home from shame that he had no robe to wear. He was favored with a worthy wife and also with children numbering 5. His wife said to him, "We can no longer ignore it, for there is no bread to eat, nakedness, and total lack. Torah you attained because you labored, but what shall we eat from this time on? As carefully as an armed warrior, you must leave for the marketplace. The gracious and merciful one above may recompense us with his mercy. The good one is shelter for us who hope to him. He does the will of those who fear him. He advised with knowledge and with
You
wisdom.
advised, now the
You
husband.
advise with knowledge and wisdom, but your plan cannot be agreed to. For my exit will be to shame and
Chagrin.
chagrin, without a garment or skirt, for I own no item to exchange, even as little as a
Pruta.
pruta's
Pruta's a
worth.
penny.
She rushed and borrowed from the neighbors beautiful and fitting clothes. He dressed and cast his burden of need upon Hashem, who he loved. His children uttered in their prayer, "May the pauper not come back chagrined." He passed through the market with his hope, and lo, the prophet Elijah came toward him. The herald spoke to him, "Today you will indeed grow wealthy. Command me as befits your honor, for I remain your loyal slave." Announce, who has in mind to purchase a slave unequaled? He thought, by what right can he change his status, that I, a slave, should sell his master? The prophet put within him wisdom to grasp him as he were the master. Thank you. A merchant bought him with affection for 800,000 pieces of gold. He asked him, "What is your trade? Have you knowledge of building? Complete a hall and a palace, then you are a free man." The first day of his occupation, he worked with laborers. Then he cried at midnight, "Answer me, O awesome of accomplishment. I planned and I was sold to be enslaved for your honor, but not for my honor. Creator of the universe, as his acquisition, you complete this building. May your mercy be kindled by my supplication, for my intention was to be good." Angels of mercy from his dwelling then began to build it. The members of his court increased, and the entire task was finished. The merchant exulted when he saw that his work was done, complete with lovely towers befitting the finest builders. May it be recalled to you now, the thing you yesterday declared. Set me free with definite clarity, as you spoke concerning freedom. He truthfully fulfilled his pledge, and the man of truth flew off.
The man of truth, that's Elijah. Flew off.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the story. That's the way it is when we sing it Saturday night. So any comparisons to be made here? Yeah, Carol.
I like the first one, but maybe it's because I knew the first one, but I like the first one better because it was more intriguing and explanatory, and you could understand it better and figure it out as we had discussed.
Right. It's a longer, more drawn out story. It fills in a lot of blanks, but it also leaves out something. How does the beginning of the song start in terms of describing this man?
He's poor, he has no clothes.
But he's studying Torah all the time.
Yeah.
He studies Torah night and day, but he can't go to the study hall because he has no clothes. He would be embarrassed. He would humiliate
But
himself.
how can he go to the marketplace?
Well, how did he go to the marketplace? There's a big difference between the way the first story's version was and this one. What happens? His wife shows the initiative. His wife goes to the neighbors, and the neighbors come through. The neighbors lend him, clothing for him to be able to go out, to go look for a job. You need a suit and a tie. So here, you don't have it yourself, we'll lend you one. So in the first story, he's bitterly complaining that nobody, cares about him. In the second story, that's, at least short term, there's a little bit of help that they're able to give him. And the wife has that, role of coming through in the clutch, right? Not only is she wise, not only does she give him good advice, but she actually has the initiative to go and do it. He has no initiative left, right? That's one of the things that happens in both of these stories. This guy is a shmata, right? This guy has been beaten down by his own circumstances where he sees no hope. He sees no way out. And he has to be saved by other people. So something to think about. And we'll continue, God willing, with more stories next time.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Rabbi, don't
talk.
forget to call John.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
gonna
right.
call John.